Welcome to Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions, hosted by Dr. Ryan Molli and Travis Buzzell. Join us on this journey as we educate the patient population, inform today's medical providers, and inspire tomorrow's medical leaders. Through education and in-depth discussions, we can all discover today's best healthcare solutions. Now, sit back and enjoy Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions Private Practice Podcasters.
Hey everybody, welcome to Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Molli, along with my co-host,
Travis Buzzell.
And this is the Private Practice Podcasters podcast. So the whole theme of this is to help educate, make people aware, and most importantly, inspire physicians that are looking for solutions, right? They're either employed or they've been employed or they're currently in private practice, but they're struggling and they want to look how they can start to unleash those golden handcuffs, so to speak, and really thrive in the private practice world. And I truly believe that pendulum has swung so far to that employed model for so long, but it's definitely starting to swing back. And the second half of my career goal, in addition to being an amazing orthopedic surgeon and delivering really good results to my patients, is to help with these young orthopedic surgeons. So, and other physicians too. It doesn't have to be orthopedic surgeon, but Trav, why don't you do the honors of introducing our guest?
Yeah, so excited about this one. Kind of crazy how people get connected online. So we got connected via LinkedIn, and so I just think some of the traction that we've gotten with some of the podcasts, kind of just going back and forth. And so without further ado, would love to announce our guest here, Zed Williamson from the Louisiana area. He owns a company called Trackable Med, which we're very eager to learn more about and hopefully educate the people in terms of that watch the show and listen to all the episodes of kind of the exciting things that he's doing and how it relates to our theme of private practice and maintaining independence. So without further ado, Zed, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So
great to have you.
I know that we kind of had a chance to catch up a little bit in between and earlier before we kind of got started here, but can you just give everyone out there kind of the 10,000 foot view of Zed, background?
Why do you always say 10,000? I always say 30,000 foot. What's more drilled down, yours or mine? I feel like I can see a little bit more.
I just feel like at 30,000 feet, it's just too high. You know what I mean? It's like
you're afraid of heights.
I'll do
right?
17,942.
You know why I say 30,000? Because I'm about 3 times as tall as you are too. So maybe that's what it is. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
in just your case, the banter. Okay, this is a common theme. Okay, yeah, it's fine.
We have fun though.
Yeah, no, it does. He's got a big forehead. 10,000, 17,932, 30,000. A broad view of kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, who is Zed and how do you get to I'm sure you've had other jobs and things, like how do you get to Trackable Med independence, like what got you there in terms of like your passion for independence and entrepreneurship and this accelerator group that you put together.
Sure. So yeah, I grew up in a town called Menlo Park, California, mostly famous now because of Facebook landing there. My father is old school Silicon Valley inventor guy, and it was just I probably have just been absorbed that mindset where I really liked the idea of experimentation, systems, and believing that there's no such thing as a vacuum. Everything creates something, and it can be on purpose, it can be on accident, but it's all predictable if we understand what those things are. I headed down a career path of advertising, and I thought that it was cool, and I was actually considered really good. I got into the space where I was writing copy, and the company I was working for was sending it all over the country, saying, hey, here, follow this model, and my head grew a bit. And one day I was driving home and my girlfriend was in the car, married now. And one of the projects that I was working on was actually on the radio at that time, and it came on the radio. I said, oh, this is that project I've been working on. It's, everyone's loving it. It's great. And she started listening. And then 3 seconds later, she starts talking about something not related. And I look at her and I look at the radio and I look at her and I look at the radio and she goes, oh, yeah, that's cute. And I went, holy moly. Basically, I'm a total fraud because she was the target audience and she did not care at all about what the industry thought was quote unquote good. And so at that point, I went down a crazy deep dive into neuroscience, human behavior, what actually drives behavior change, and continued a career where I kept trying to change that advertising world. Let's do things on purpose. Let's actually achieve outcomes. And the industry didn't want to do that because unfortunately, media companies just want to brag about audiences. A lot of times, and this might hurt some people's feelings, ad agencies want to be quote unquote creative, but no one ever said, hey, we're going to go achieve this business outcome. A company is spending money. There should be a return on investment. And here's a plan to get there. So I started Trackable Med. And I started in the medical space because it seemed like that was this space that was so many patients don't know that there's a solution for them. And one of the most common things I hear from surgeons and physicians is a patient will say, man, I wish I had come in sooner. Well, that is telling us something. They should have come in sooner, but they didn't know, or they were biased against it. So I started a company, got introduced to some practices through medical device, and we started our first campaign in May of 2011. And we had this amazing response. Patients, the ideal patient from a very specific procedure, just responded like crazy. I had hired a call center at the time to take the calls and transfer them to the private practices that were participating. And we sent 40 patients to this one practice. And I just was thinking, holy moly, this is the greatest success ever. I saw that surgeon's caller ID on my flip phone, flipped open the phone to answer it, thinking he was going to offer to buy me a yacht. And he just let me have it. Said I was a total fraud. What a waste of money, no return on investment. And I was completely confused. On accident, those calls were recorded. I listened to him, and that's when I met who I refer to as Agnes, who hates her life, that was answering all of his phone calls. And she was just bludgeoning the opportunity of these patients actually coming in for an appointment. And I said, okay, we have to control that. So I started a appointment setting call center, trained the team in understanding of human behavior and bias. And that's where the company started, so that we would connect with a practice that wanted more very specific ideal patients. They loved treating them. They had good outcomes and they were healthy for the practice. And then we would answer the phone as the practice and book the appointment, being able to say, here's the very specific result. It's something you can deposit into the bank account. So that's the history of the company Trackable Med.
Real quick question. The girlfriend, is that, I know you said you're married now. Is that your wife now?
Yes.
Okay. So it did last. It wasn't like when she hurt your feelings, it wasn't like, all right, you're done. Pull over to the side of the road.
That's part of the origin story, right? She was,
that's a great origin story.
Straight shooter enough to go like, oh yeah, well, it's all right.
So, okay. I mean, one of the things that just kind of listening to just kind of the story in the background there, it's just like kind of something that, Dr. Molli and I kind of allude to all the time. It's like where there's a problem, there's a solution. So like you keep running into these, because again, my big question was, is it exactly all the things you're answering now? It's like, okay, I understand the concept of an accelerator and what it's supposed to do in terms of, increasing volume and outcomes and something that, a desired or measurable outcome, that you can put into context. But like, how do you achieve that? Because there are all these roadblocks and exactly the stuff that you're talking about, like the people answering the phones. How are they scheduling that? How is that perceived? All of those sort of things that, especially, for our theme of private practice and independence, right? It's like every single, touch to, a human, that you're talking to on the phone is so vital and important, because it's not like, there's just people are just coming by and dumping buckets on that, like all the time. So if you have one bad experience, how many people, do they have that same conversation with? And it ultimately has nothing to do with the surgeon or the outcome or the device or the this or the that, right? There's all these things that are, kind of out of your control. And it sounds like, from your experience, through Trackable Med is like, okay, we need to take more ownership of controlling that piece of it in order to get the outcome that we want.
Yeah.
And so
If you imagine, oops, sorry.
that's I'm just in my head too. And, we can delve into it a little bit, but so hiring a call center and then a call center appointment, like, are these people that you're like third party, like affiliated with, and that network has grown? Or, because I have to assume like that could potentially be kind of expensive too. And, the way that the model for the accelerator breaks down, like how did you get to that place?
I actually did hire them directly, and it's been our model. Actually, the roof I'm under right now is there's people still at the office answering phone calls for the West Coast right now and booking appointments. The reason is culture is very important to me.
Sure.
And the true why behind this business is a simple statement, is that it is our job to help people realize they don't have to live that way. And there's 3 groups within that why. The first group is the patients. There are patients out there, their brain is designed to survive today. That's what our brain is built to do. It's cursed with bias and heuristics that doesn't do a very good job of thinking about tomorrow. And so what that does, if you're in pain, if you're under stress, maybe if you're not that healthy, you are on a complete automatic driving system that doesn't really make good decisions long term. And so we see it as our job to help patients realize that there's ways to get out of pain. There's minimally invasive options sometimes. They don't have to just keep living that way. Most patients feel like, well, I'm getting older. It just is the way it is. I think that's BS. The second group is our staff. There's a lot of people who go to work because they have to, and it's the worst time that they spend in their life. I hate that. On Sunday night, I want all of my team fired up that it's Monday the next day.
That's my
And
guy.
Yeah.
it's
Here.
that, because that's, you spend more time at the office than you do anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so if you do that on purpose and you understand human behavior and neuroscience, we can create an environment where someone maybe was a call center employee and just was belittled and, even built a life around complaining around work. It could be how they connect with their spouse when they go home. Like, hey, let's talk about how bad today was, but they don't have to live that way.
Yeah.
And then the third group is our clients, where I just sit here as a private practice business owner, hope the right patients show up, and deal with drama in my office. And I don't get to control pricing, so I better control my costs. Just that drives me nuts. You don't have to live that way. So that's why we did, hire. They all work under the same roof. It's really an important part about who we are.
So like in terms of like disciplines, right? So I guess like the marketing side, and then you have this experience, this epiphany that it's just again I'm underselling this, but a bunch of guys in a room just chatting about a topic, and this is going to be the pitch, and this is what's going to get everyone to go goo goo gaga over the next widget or whatever, right? And you're like, okay, like I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going down this other path. Do all this research, understand human behavior a little bit more. So we're going to design, this company Trackable Med to, essentially, do all of these things, but in a much more efficient, measurable way, right? So like healthcare, the patients that might, like, was there any type of connection from like the marketing piece of what you did, like to like transitioned into the healthcare space, or was it just like a strategic, like, okay, this makes sense for in terms of like the biggest need, or like how does that translate over into like the private practice med device space? Like, is there a connection that brings you to that place?
It was an accident. I came across a message for a procedure, and I understood the idea of the procedure, and it was one of the worst messages ever created. And I reached out to a local surgeon and let them know that, and they introduced me to the medical device company, and it kind of spawned from there, because everywhere we did our work, their sales reps walked across the President's Club stage because their clients had such higher volume. And so in the beginning, it was literally on accident. And then once I realized how important it was, the work we were doing, then we decided, let's stay here.
So, as a surgeon, I hear this all the time. The physician burnout rate is at an all-time high. I think I've touched on this on both of my podcasts, almost every single episode. The physician suicide rate is now higher than any other occupation in the United States. And orthopedic surgeons are number one at 28.2% of orthopedic surgeons. I feel very fortunate that I'm the guy, and I say this, Sundays, I'm jazzed. I'm ready to go because Monday, I get to go what I truly believe God put me on this planet to do professionally. Don't get me wrong. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my 3 boys. I love spending time with them. But after the weekend and we've done our family stuff, I'm ready to go make an impact. I'm ready to go use the gifts and knowledge that, God's given me and that I've, attained through hard work. And I want to help people. How do the third thing that you mentioned was kind of like improving that quality of life and not just kind of as a private practice guy thinking, well, not only are our reimbursements like stagnant, they're going down, right?
Yep.
So how do you shift that mentality of such negativity to positivity for physicians and saying, okay, there's a way out of this? Because that's part of this is right. It's like the healthcare solutions. How do we provide those private practice and maybe they're even employed physicians solutions for this, what seems to be very dire straits, right? With declining reimbursement each and every year.
It's a really good point. We worked with hundreds of practices over the years, and that's why we built the Physician Growth Accelerator. And the Physician Growth Accelerator dives into the full practice business. So there's 9 points of constraint, and culture is one of them. But the reason I believe that burnout is, imagine being in a canoe and you're swinging your oar as hard as you can, but it's not in the water. And I think that's the feeling that private practice can get, where they feel like they're on a conveyor belt, but they don't get to control where the conveyor belt goes. And that's where burnout comes from. You don't believe you're achieving things that fuel you. Like you said, I guarantee you that you don't love work because you're not busy, right? It's because what you do matters, and you see that and you feel like you have purpose and you're driving something. And so one of the things that we will uncover within the practice is all these points of constraint. Practices rarely realize that they are there, and they're constantly battling them. And so they spend all their energy against those things that they feel like they don't have control over. Reimbursements are going down. You can't control that they're going down. But what if we look at your schedule and identify ideal patients, and we identify a conversion rate of appointment setting, we identify a conversion rate of procedures, and we structure a schedule that uses your time in a way that drives more value? Now you're basically taking control of reimbursement, because instead of sitting there hoping the right patients show up, you're doing it on purpose. And there's so many aspects of a practice that can be stressful. We did a survey in another specialty, an ENT specialty, 100 surgeon survey. And basically anybody that was feeling extraordinary stress, it was related to drama, employee turnover, people not feeling like they're rowing in the same direction. And that is a human behavior thing. That is so fixable that it's like we have to get out there and fix it, but it's very fixable.
What is the breakdown or all the specialties that, this isn't like specific to one thing. It sounds like you can kind of plug and play, there's probably some,
heavy hitters.
Yeah. And some specialty things that probably align a little bit more, but what are the sort of specialties that, Trackable Med is currently working with?
Most of our work is in ear, nose, and throat, podiatry, orthopedic, spine, urology. That's going to be more than 80% would be those specialties. There's nothing that doesn't work for it. It's the mindset. You have to be ready. You have to be frustrated enough to make some changes. If you don't care, we're not going to be a good fit to help you do anything. But if you're sick and tired of these little things getting in the way of you doing what you absolutely love, then it's going to work out.
So, I mean, I think we both do, and most of the people that, follow Red Carpet and, everything that we've been talking about since kind of the inception of the idea of what Red Carpet, what we're trying to instill in people, and, inspire has been kind of a key word tonight. But like, for me, my biggest roadblock for what you're talking about is like, I can see you right now and the passion and the story. And I'm like, all right, I'm bought in, right? Like, this makes sense to me. So are you doing this in person in the practice? Because like to get people fired up and like it's like, hey, you got to get pissed enough that I'm going to make a change today because I'm not going to do this anymore, right? Because eventually what happens is, and Ryan knows this as probably as well as anybody, it's like you either figure out solutions to those problems, you continue to deal with them, or you leave private practice. Like those are essentially the options, right? And the definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's like, how do you get in front of these people all over the country? Like, is it you, a sales team? Like how, because I love the message, but I'm just thinking to myself like, man, this over the phone, man, what's this guy talking about?
And before you answer that, Zed, I just want to like piggyback Travis. You mentioned like when you first started, I'm thinking, okay, this is like how to get ideal patients, right? It's a call center. It's line up the right people so that my conversion rate goes up. But you also mentioned some of the biggest pain points that I've heard that I've experienced personally. It's the staffing drama. It's the turnover rate. It's those things that are just so frustrating as a business owner. So that's not done through a call center. That sounds like more like coaching. Like, do you have different platforms within?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we do is we do a diagnostic. It's very similar to what you would do with a patient. Is we first are going to identify what are the constraints and what are those constraints worth to the practice, and then we build a plan to fix them. I have to say that the Physician Growth Accelerator is a consulting partner, and I hate the word consulting because most of the time it feels like I'm going to point out all the bad stuff and then I'm going to leave you. What we do is we operationalize the data and then put training or changes in place. So let's say, for example, a practice has major phone issues, which is not surprising. We did a 7,000 call study, and on average, private practice missed 42% of all incoming phone calls. So
Sounds about right.
before you go out and spend a bunch of money on advertising, hey, let's answer those calls, right? But so what we would do is, it's a problem now. We're going to answer calls for you as you, and we're going to convert a lot of those to appointments while we help you understand how to staff up and train those people so we can fire us. In that model, that's that part of it. From a culture standpoint, it depends what the culture issue is, but there are processes that people can follow where you can create a very powerful culture. There's processes in hiring, so you're getting the right people. It reduces turnover. It's all about the diagnostic. What are the issues? And then what's the order in which we tackle these and help you get through them?
So you use the word constraint. Is it safe to say that I can use pain point as a synonym for constraint or roadblock?
Yeah. Pain point is a symptom of a constraint. I consider a constraint, if you think about, if I were to force you underwater and you're 3 feet down, but I've got a bunch of McDonald's straws connected together, so they're nice and big and you can breathe. It doesn't matter which straw I swap out with a coffee straw, that puts pressure on your ability to breathe, and that exists in business. None of this stuff exists in a vacuum. So the constraint is understanding where is it a bottleneck that is reducing opportunity or reducing throughput? And is it because we're not fully exploiting that bottleneck? Meaning, if you can, let's say you're an ENT and you're doing CT scans in the office. If you're set up where you can only do 9 CT scans a day, that's a constraint, and you have to make sure that you're doing 9 every day. So we need to build the system to make sure we're exploiting that constraint, or we find out a way to increase capacity. And so it depends on how we're attacking it. The reason this all came about, I'll use a weird analogy. If we gave the perfect recipe to, let's say, the perfect delicious brownie, and everybody followed it exactly, but then they took it home and it got put into 10 different ovens, and when you took it out, all the brownies were very different. That's what we've witnessed over our career, is we were putting these ideal patients in. So we have this, here's this recipe, it's perfect, it looks great. It goes in the oven, and sometimes it comes out delicious, sometimes it comes out burnt, sometimes it comes out raw. And so we have to understand what's wrong with the oven or the medical practice to be able to tweak what needs to be fixed.
So here's a real life example that a lot of guys and girls that have private practices, their pain point, symptom of the constraint is, okay, we have declining reimbursements every year, have zero control over that, right? That's one of the only industries where we can't actually set our prices. And overhead is going up. So even if you gave me 10 out of 10 perfect patients, I think a lot of the constraint that I would see that a lot of guys and girls have is we're on the treadmill, and a lot of times it's like, well, volume will solve those problems. Volume only solves those problems to a certain point, because I'm not a robot, right? I do 800 joints a year. I'm not doing more. I can't. And if I do, it's going to have negative consequences on me personally, physically, mentally, emotionally, my family life. But the math, the economics of the practice, again, reimbursement's going down, cost of all of my overhead, direct, indirect, for all of my employees continues to go up. I mean, what's the solution there? I know that I'm asking for an easy, give me the answer when you don't know the oven, you haven't been in the oven.
Yep.
But that's just basic economics.
Yep. So what we tend to find, that's one of the most unfulfilling answers ever, but it depends answer. But if you believe that keeping good employees equals you paying them more, then I can tell you there's already something to fix. And there's likely unused capacity that exists in the practice. Maybe it's not tied to you doing in another joint, but there's probably something else there. It could be that you're overstaffed for some things, but you don't know that because you're counting the 800 joints. And you might think, man, if I reduce staffing here, it's going to impact the 800. It may not be correct. And so it's about understanding the entire system. One thing you'll hear, we have a podcast, the Physician Growth Accelerator, where we touch, it's very short episodes where we touch on one little constraint each time. But everything is built on this idea that every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. And people who will not wrap their head around that, it'll never work out working with us, because we have to own it. If we don't like the decreasing reimbursements and the increasing cost, and we just don't like it, you're not going to get anywhere. We have to say the system I'm running is creating that based on all the other inputs. So if I want a different outcome, I have to look at changing the system.
For sure.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think, and you kind of alluded to it, I mean, it's a tough question too, right? It's like, all things created equal, this is as much volume as I'm going to do. How am I going to become more profitable? I think, to piggyback off what Zed was saying, it's like, it's the process of what that looks like. Like, how do you get that? It's like, and I'm sure in advertising, and for me on the med device, on the sales side of things, it's like, let me see, pull up your salesforce.com and let me see that funnel, right? It's like, sometimes they all don't fit into that funnel the same way. And, they all don't flow down as nice as you want. So it's like, I feel like it also is creating efficiencies too. And I think that's kind of what another theme, I guess, to kind of the conversation. And I mean, everything that we do, it's just like, the more efficient things are, generally the happier people are. And, for what we're talking about, like, that's just like a specific not profitability question, but it's like, how can something like Zed, like what you guys are doing in terms of, the accelerator thing, it's like there's a volume component to it too. But I feel like the other piece that, quite honestly, I didn't realize until we started talking was like kind of that coaching or that office-based sort of solution thing. Because, to be honest with you, I mean, yeah, more volume, profit, all that stuff is one thing, but the pain points or the constraints and those sort of things, whether or not how that affects the profitability of the practice or the business or whatever that is, it's like, even if you generated the same amount as you did the year previous and the year previous to that, but your life was significantly better and you had less constraints and less pain points, like, to me, there's a huge value in that. Like, have you run into that with practices where it's just like, hey, listen, like, yeah, there's some scheduling tweaks that we can make. Yes, the surgeon is very good. He's very efficient, but it's drama, it's turnover, it's this, it's that, where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe we didn't make $1 million more the following year, but my quality of life and like the headaches that I have are reduced drastically. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
And employees who are fired up about being there over time cost less because you're not dealing with the turnover, you're not dealing with the drama, you're not dealing with the snarky comments or people not showing up in where now I need this person to work overtime. Like, there are so many inefficiencies related to that drama aspect. And it'll blow you away some of the stuff we've uncovered. There was a practice that was frustrated because they weren't getting new patient appointments that they thought they should. And we're digging into the data, and we have a team that will review even phone calls and all this stuff. And the main person booking the appointments did everything they could for a patient to not book an appointment. And it would sound something like, well, do you know if we take your insurance? Well, I don't know. Well, you better call your insurance company and find out. And then maybe call us back. That kind of level of like, you are not welcome here. And so when we dig into it, it turns out that the manager of that person screamed and yelled about every detail that was wrong. And so all this person has is a brain that is good at surviving today. And the bias told that person, if I don't book an appointment, I can't have a wrong detail. And if I don't have a wrong detail, I don't get yelled at. And so here's a practice that's spending more money on advertising, doing all these other things. And the reality was it was a human issue on the inside.
So
that's
both
the
of
kind
those
of stuff that you
employees,
can uncover.
were they both retained? Were you able to work through that?
Long term, no.
Okay. I'm guessing manager left.
Yeah.
Or was let go.
Voluntary or involuntary.
Yeah.
Good guess.
But the thing is we also, as business leaders, we have to own that. Like the point when we say, that's my fault, I'm going to make the change, but we got here, it's my fault, because every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So something was driving that manager to believe that the appropriate way to deal with that person was a way that was hurting the practice. And the more we own it, that's where I also believe that burnout goes away. Because sometimes the things that suck in life, that's not what creates burnout. It's the struggle that we get through that makes us enjoy the thing on the other side. And owning something and saying, you know what, I'm in control of this. I'm choosing to have this belief about it, and I'm going to go do this thing to fix it. That is really fulfilling. So I think that's probably why a lot of surgeons like doing what they're doing, because
I guarantee
that's what they're doing for the patient.
You've read this. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Oh, yeah. It's required reading to work here, actually.
Right. I mean, that's stoicism, and that's exactly what you're explaining. And that's how my brain kind of works too, right? It's like there's opportunity at every roadblock that you can look at it the Eeyore way and like, oh, this isn't fair, poor me, blah, blah, blah. Or you can look at it and make some lemonade out of those lemons and figure out the way through it. And if you haven't already, I started book clubs I have a leadership team at my practice. Travis is on that leadership team and is probably one of my most valued kind of consiglieres, if you will.
Consigliere.
Yeah. So right now we're doing, Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. Oh. That's a great one. It's the restaurant industry, but man, is it good. And we are incorporating aspects of that into the practice. Have you ever heard the book Breath? Or
I'm not familiar with that.
Some people call it Breathe, but I think it's actually Breath.
I did both because I don't know how to read. So.
Yeah. But then The Obstacles Away is another one that we're going to do too for book club too. It's a great book. It's a quick read too, super small.
I think though, Zed, to your point, for me, and again, opinion based, that's the biggest obstacle though of what you're talking about. It's like that transparent conversation of like, people don't want to have that shitty conversation. And let's just call a spade a spade. They don't want to, right? Because yeah, although it does fester and it does create a bigger issue, it's like, it's easier not to have the conversation. I don't want to be the bad guy.
Until it's not.
Exactly. And it's like, but it comes to a head to where it's like, and, we have, somebody as a part of the leadership team too. And she's a life coach and she has some really good kind of like, I call them Allison-isms, and that's her first name. But like, this like, we make up stories in our heads. And it's like, oh, so-and-so is not doing this. And it's like, well, you just need to tell them that, no, this is how this works and this is how this is going to go and we're going to do it this way. But they're going to leave. We're going to be a person down. It's like, you haven't even had the conversation yet and it's doomsday already. They're leaving. They're packing their bags. They're going home. It's like, you have to have that difficult conversation. And at the end of the day, it's like the sooner you do that, the better off everybody is going to be. That individual, the business, the system, right? All that stuff that you're talking about and incorporating into kind of private practice, business ownership, entrepreneurship. It's like
the culture. He mentioned that earlier too. That was the biggest thing a year and a half ago when actually it's been two years.
Yeah.
That I brought Allison on board. She meets with our team every Wednesday for a couple hours, and it was
awesome.
A culture shift, right? We needed to, I kind of wrote out we started with like my mission statement, which I didn't really have one. I had one just on paper, but it wasn't meaningful. It wasn't impactful. It wasn't inspiring. And it needed to be true and from my core. And when I did that and I came up with some kind of key words.
Pillars.
Yeah. That became like our culture shift. And it was, I think, quickly adopted, and we have an amazing leadership team now. I'm so proud of how much everybody has grown. And another Allisonism is it's not a weak point; it's a growth edge, right? It's her positive spin on it. It's like it's an opportunity where you can actually grow. It's not necessarily looking at it from the negative side of things.
Well, a part of the challenge too is, I think we can all agree since, and I hate using COVID as an excuse because it's not. It's just human nature, but. The employer-employee model has changed, and it looks a lot different than it did 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, right? Just there's certain expectations, and there's certain things that you just don't bend on, right? It's having a job, right? These are just basic kind of agreements when you take ownership of saying, yes, I'd like to accept that position. It's just not like the way that it used to be. And so, sometimes a part of those challenges too are like the pass the buck mentality, right? It's like creating a culture where it's like, that's not my job. I can't tell you, I dislike that so much. We don't say the HATE word because my 4-year-old repeats it and I get yelled at. But I don't. It's just like, that's not my job. It's just like, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It's like, yeah, I get it that might not be your role, but how can you help push that forward, right? It's like, I'm not very good at golf, right? But I play it a lot. So my goal is I need to transition and progress that ball forward with each shot. The idea is I'm not going backwards. So Yeah,
I play with you. Sometimes it goes backwards.
it's only a few times. Just
Mine's got backwards.
this podcast potentially could end in me putting it in a headlock. Just Zed to warn you. No, but it is, and I cannot, and why, which I'm happy that LinkedIn connected us, and that we're having this conversation, and I think people need to hear it. It's like culture is so important, and look around, and if you're the person saying that you have the oh, this is great, it's like, I got to tell you, I've been in the world a little bit the last couple of years, and it's not. It's just not. There are a lot of places that they have this identity issue, and a lot of it is that kind of culture, and it's kind of that well, that's I'm just picking a name out of a hat. That's Jan's job or whatever it might be, and it's just like,
Yep.
Ew, like you don't necessarily need to be the person that completes that task, but like, let's have that conversation, right? It's like, how do you tactfully?
We're all in the same boat, and we're all hopefully rowing in the same direction.
Yeah,
And we got to put our oars in the water.
It's a team effort. Right?
So, Zed, I have a question. I like to ask this for all my podcast guests, regardless of whatever podcast it is. What is your superpower? What is your number one strongest quality that has made you as successful as you have become, and the leader that you've become? And who did you get it from?
I would say probably got it from my father, and it's curiosity with understanding of the entire narrative. I didn't realize this until I was maybe probably just 5 or 6 years ago, but my father never answered a question I ever asked. He always suggested a question back to me of how can we find out? And we would do goofy experiments. We would, I could ask a question of, what would happen if I threw an orange against a brick wall? I don't know. How do we find out? Well, let's throw the orange. And then what do you think is going to happen? And why do you think that happened? And how could it happen different? So I think that's really probably what I would say is that understanding the entire system, that whole idea that these things don't exist in a vacuum. And when you pull a lever over here, all the little dominoes that fall, being able to structure those with purpose to create an outcome that we're looking for.
If you could give a plug for Trackable Med or for the Physician Growth Accelerator, what's your biggest success story? Like, can you give us, without naming names or naming practices?
Sure.
Can you give us an example of that? Like one of the toughest challenges or problems you've had and how you were able to turn it around?
Yeah, I would say someone leaving a large group and diving into private practice, and within a few years getting to a point of time and revenue that people still don't believe is possible, where they are doing over 2 million in net revenue and never staying late, just having fun, powerful team that's working together, and just in a few years. And it's just because they really followed the process from start to finish. And it's pretty awesome to see.
So, and something that I kind of alluded to earlier, but so in each of these, like the reason that the different disciplines, like you seem to like have a pretty good understanding of like these practices and like that process, like how many CT scan you kind of alluded to, we're going to do 9 of these. And like, is this just now inherently something that has just learned, or like, is there like a discovery phase when because like all these different disciplines, orthopedics, podiatry, ENT, urology, there's like not all things created equal, and there's a lot of different processes, tests, things. Like, how do you dial down into like what is all encompassing of that before?
So when we launch with someone, we do a really in-depth diagnostic that it takes about 30 days, and it is full understanding of everything that exists in the practice today. How I started the company, medical device is who introduced us to practices early on.
Sure.
And so we also have the medical sales accelerator, which still works with medical device companies. So we are always up on understanding what diagnostic tests are needed to understand that a patient is a candidate for this procedure or that procedure. Um, and then we've done now thousands of patient interviews. And this is going to sound weird, so hang with me. But the reason we do a patient interview is not to ask them, how was your visit? And did you like the surgeon? But we actually take them close to a hypnotic state. Hypnosis is not about acting like a chicken. It's about just being at a very comfortable state where we're able to unravel some bias that exists in their mind. And what we do is we identify the heuristic or biases that kept them from coming sooner. And so we really understand the patient standpoint, because that's how we structure messaging to get people to raise their hand and go, holy moly, I want to be fixed. And then we do the same thing on the medical device side. We'll interview orthopedic surgeons and understand what's the bias and heuristics around changing technology. You know, what kept you from shifting from this device to this device, and then using that as well. So I think when you pile all that together, we've been doing it a while now. That's what's created that understanding. And now we just need to find out the practice individual scenario.
So the surveys and some of the other things you've alluded to, during our conversation, is that data collected by Trackable Med for Trackable Med, or is it collected by Trackable Med for the practice, or both?
So yeah, we'll do the full breakdown and present it back to the practice as here's what we uncovered. This specific constraint is worth, $347,000 in revenue, and this is out of your numbers. It's not us doing some weird, this times this every time is this dollar.
Right.
It's using your information and saying, if we tweak this, here's what we should expect. Here's how fast we should expect it, and here's how we tweak it. And so that we do give all that back to the practice. So basically, we give them, we structured it. I feel kind of fancy about this idea, but we basically made it like a blood test result where you see the metric and you see normal, abnormal, are you high or low? What's the reference range you should be in? What's your specific number? And how is that affecting your practice from a revenue standpoint?
Green, yellow, red. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. So, I've got one thing that I'm specifically have been wanting to ask you this entire time since we've been talking about it, but I do want to jump over at some point about the med device accelerator component, because I'm interested, because I have to assume that there's a mutual benefit to the physician accelerator and the med device, sort of, right? That relationship and that conduit potentially for those folks. So I'm going to get to that in a second, but one of the things, just because I think recently, like on, social media platforms, you don't have to name all of them, but you can use your imagination. There's 5 big ones. So we keep talking about culture and like getting people fired up on Sunday, and like how do you, like, is there like a secret sauce to like getting those people excited to do that? Because like I've seen these like training modules online, right, where they, this guy that comes in and he's dressed up and he's like, tell me this, I'm going to give you my objections. You got overcome, and it's just like, this guy obviously is on the spot and is not going to say anything that's comprehensible and not even remotely as to what this guy's looking for, which happens every single time. And then he gives this very eloquent response that he gives to everybody. And it's like, oh, that's the perfect way to overcome an objection. Now I'm fired up and I need to do this and do that and create these habits. It's like, you and I both know, because especially you're talking about neuroscience and brain and behavior. You and I both know that it's not that easy, right? I mean, you said, we're surviving today. So it's like, how do you get somebody who, if you're already identifying that problem, like to get to that point where they're excited about work?
So, Ryan, you mentioned earlier that you have 3 boys, right?
Yep.
So if they do something that you believe goes against your values, do you let them go, or do you let them off the hook, or do you talk to them about it?
No, there's a conversation.
And it's quick, right?
It's
and
immediate.
you don't wonder,
It's
I wonder if I
immediate.
should talk.
No.
Boom. And it's not because you care about your values. It's because you care about them.
Mm-hmm.
So of any human, we hold our children more accountable than any other people on the planet. And it's because I would say it's because we have the most compassion and love for that person compared to anyone else. For someone to get excited, they have to believe they matter. And a skill set is like a flash in the pan. You might get a little excited, but if they don't believe what they are doing matters, you're just not going to get there. And that is up to the organization. It's up to the organization to say these values, and I don't mean like a plaque that says integrity. Everybody says integrity. I mean a true behavioral, I can witness this value. This is who we are. And people who don't operate that way, they're not part of this tribe. People who do operate that way, you're a part of this tribe, and we will go to war for you because what you do matters. And when you create that environment, everybody's fired up. And it's not necessarily tied to a specific skill. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, yeah. I mean, I love that. The tribe thing. I mean, because to me, I mean, we've talked about it. It's kind of like, you know, and he and I joke around about this. And my partner on the DME side, he's Italian. So, you know, we joke around. He comes from a specific family that if you're with him, don't worry about it. Right. So, but it's one of those things where, I mean, you're right. You know, it's like people want to feel like they matter. They want to know that you care, and, you know, creating that culture where it's like, hey, we got your back. Right. And so it's not like you're just here to push a button.
No,
and
they're valued, right?
You know, but that just seems like, it seems so basic, but I think
It's basic, but here's what people do. People say that's squishy, or, oh, well, you know, we're not soft like that here. And I'll give you the kind of the evolution aspect of it. So the world we live in today represents a very small percentage of what our brain has dealt with. And our brain is amazing. I mean, look what we survived through over thousands of years. And the biggest aspect, and why COVID did impact people in a way that is really unfortunate, is we needed our community. And if you did anything that a couple thousand years ago, if you did anything to get ostracized by your community, it equaled death. And so my argument would be, the reason why Jenny says that's not my job is because she's worried that if she does something wrong, that she's going to be ostracized from her community. And she doesn't, it's hard for her to come away from the idea that that means death, because it's built into our bias and our heuristics. And so the organization has to take control of showing safety from a psychological standpoint. And I don't mean squishy, let's make everybody happy. That's not at all what I'm talking about. That it's about, if this was your kid, what would you set the standard, and when would you have the conversation?
So you were in marketing initially, right?
Yep.
What was that your undergrad degree?
I am a college dropout. I lasted about 9 months, and it was I was paying my way through school, and I saw these kids at the time walking around campus with their gigantic cell phones, and I'm working 96 hours a week, and it just didn't make sense to me at the time. So I went straight into the working world.
So, but marketing was your initial kind of workforce. Your dad was, you mentioned, an
so he's
inventor?
old school Hewlett Packard. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, did you go to school, or how did you learn all this human behavioral, how the brain works type of stuff? Were you reading tons of books?
Tons, hundreds.
So kind of self-taught then?
Yep. Self-taught and implemented, and then just tweaking on the feedback.
How about 5 love languages? Have you read it? Do you know about it?
Yep.
Do you incorporate it at all?
We don't incorporate that into the office, not for any reason, but there's so many other things that we do incorporate that it might start to be a distraction. It's a great tool.
The only reason I bring it up is, you know, you're talking about getting people pumped up, getting them ready. And to me, it's like different people feel it requires something different for them to kind of feel that sense of appreciation or value, right?
Yep.
And it's the same thing with, like, different people feel loved different ways, whether it's physical touch, you know, acts of service.
That would not go well.
No. But I'm just saying, like acts of service, words of affirmation, whatever it may be. I feel like it may be a little tricky, but important to understand each of your employees.
What motivates them?
Yeah, right. And how their brain works and how they tick, because you can't treat position A the same as position B and B like C, because their brains are wired differently.
Yeah.
And saying you're super important, you're great, we love you, this and that may resonate unbelievably with employee A, but B, they already think that about themselves and they need something a little bit differently. How do you attack that?
Yeah. So a process that we suggest people use is when we see or we witness the behavior that we want, typically it gets ignored. That's bad, because then what we're doing is we ignore them when they're doing what we want, and then we only call out when they do what we don't want. So that's not a super effective way to drive behavior change. We want to call out the good things, and then we want to explain why it matters to the entire organization, and then we want to explain why it matters to me. So if I go, Travis, when you did this thing, man, you set us up to absolutely crush Q1, and that's going to impact every person in this organization. And it's really important to me because I saw how much you care about getting this goal done, and that just means a lot. That speaks to all the love languages, because what we're doing is we're reinforcing you're part of the tribe. There is no danger of you getting ostracized, and it's that communication. And there's some people love pats on the back, some people don't need it. Everyone likes the why. If you just go like, hey man, good job. Some people, that's great. A lot of people are like, yeah, whatever. I don't need that crap. But if you go, look, good job, here's why it matters, everyone likes that.
Yeah, so you just said that, and I've my entire career, I was almost 10 years in the med device manufacturing space. As a manufacturer sales rep to private practices, big hospitals, a whole litany of different backgrounds in terms of like call points that I would call on. Now in business ownership and entrepreneurship, like that comment that you just said there, it's like, whatever, that doesn't matter to me. Or I don't need the accolade. I don't need the slap on the back. It's like, what's your experience with that? Like, cause I get it. Like, I think to a certain degree, but I feel like everybody wants to feel appreciated, right? Like, and a pat on the back, it's not necessarily like, I need, but like acknowledgement, right? Like, I feel like just at all levels, whether it's your personal relationship with your family, your children, your wife, your business partners, your, whatever it might be, like, right? I'm not crazy to think that like those people are full of shit, right?
Yeah, there's an aspect of some people that it makes them uncomfortable. And so that's what they'll say like, I don't need that. But the why is comfortable for everybody.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I want to do is jump over to the med device sales accelerator. So
sure.
I mean, I'm just guessing it's probably pretty similar to, the physician growth accelerator in terms of like the concept behind like kind of what you're doing, but on the sales side, right? So like, it's a little bit different from a private practice physician side. It's like the sale, and I say sale, but I only use that as a placeholder for whatever the appropriate, I guess descriptor would be. But the sale is having a patient who didn't realize they had this need. We identify that need. Now we've created this solution, and they become a patient, and they have that pull through. And so boom, now they're a patient and they potentially have surgery or whatever that might be. So on the sales side, is it directed towards, especially on the med device side, right? Because you understand that there's a customer and a patient. A potentially a physician partner and a patient who are both customers. So in terms of like identifying, which is what, like how does that work? Are you more so helping those, groups with maybe both of those groups, or is it more, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So one of the biggest mistakes medical device makes is they spend all this time and money, they get a ton of data, and then they go and just try to show data. And then physicians are smart, and so they ask for more data because then it kind of puts off the decision, right? And then the salesperson runs back to the organization and goes, oh, we need this other data. And then the whole team goes, oh my God, we need more data. Let's go get more data. And what we do is we go into the bias of the two humans. So the human that is the physician and then the human that is the patient. So if the medical device company understands the heuristics and biases that are in the way of the patient seeking care, and they understand the biases that are in the way of a physician changing their approach, then you can structure those the conversations to be specific to that person. So instead of just shoving an 87-page PowerPoint down the throat of a surgeon where you're just excited, bragging about whatever size of whatever device, understand what matters to that person, understand what fears exist from change, or what is the other part of it. And so that the communication could just be very specific. And then medical device companies will hire us to do patient education campaigns where you're driving awareness of a procedure or a disease state. And so it's more aligned with the more the neuroscience behind behavior change.
So like, how do you get to that point? Like that fact-finding mission? Like, let's just say like, Dr. Molli and I's, meeting was like kind of very random, right? He's, breaking off, going private. There's an opportunity, a mutual med device connection, kind of like, hey, you got to talk to these guys. My partner's like, hey, we're going to have dinner with this guy. And I mean, we go and meet, and it's like, give him kind of our, 30,000 foot view of what we could do for him.
Sounds better.
And, no, seriously, I mean, it was just like, all right, great, And then 2 days after Christmas, he goes, I made my decision. It's you guys. And by the way, January 3rd, I'll see you. And I'm like, that's in like 5 days. Figure it out, right? So like that was unique in terms of like how that relationship started and how we are and where we've gotten today. But like, how do you get to the point where you're like, what does this doc want? Like, I'm having a hard enough time trying to pitch him a product or a service or a whatever I'm doing. Like, how do you get that? Like, what's important to him?
Yep. So I geek out on this, and I'm probably the only one on the planet. But what we do is we create a negative logical pathway. And so hang with me for a second. We'll use the urology space. So if a urologist does not have access to a certain type of machine and they buy into your technology, they will not be a customer. That's one negative logical pathway. If the surgeon has access to that machine but does not believe in your treatment, that will not equal them, converting. If they believe that your treatment equals lower quality than current treatment, they won't. So if you start writing, and it's based on bias. So let's say we know that one of the issues with treating prostate cancer from a bias standpoint is bounded rationality, which is basically saying, I am fixing cancer, so it can't be done better. Okay, because that's what the brain wants to do. It wants to feel comfortable. And so if you come in and you say, hey, we help you fix cancer, well, you're done. But if you can shift the conversation for them to understand that their bounded rationality is missing something that's helpful for the patient, then the conversation opens up. So if you go through this negative logical pathway based in bias, it tells you all the ways to lose the sale. And the cool thing about doing that is it also shows you the path to change behavior.
So I guess, because I get what you're saying, right? It's just like, I know because for the most part, right, if he's not a customer, you kind of understand what the industry objectives are or objections are, right? Like, why are you using this as opposed to this, right? And so some of that is, unknown, right? I haven't gotten to that point yet. Well, how could you do it better than what I'm doing? Because I'm doing it the best, right? So how could you improve what already is great? So like, I get that piece of it, but like, is this a training module that like you provide to these sales forces or like these maybe like specified, like specialty sales groups within these organizations that tackle those sort of projects? Like, how do you, because, I've been doing this a long time, and I get all those objections, and, understand how to appeal to just a human too, and understand the sensitivity of their time, right? Because it's like, I know what, all these guys go through. It's like, I've got 40 patients in the clinic. I've got 8 cases later. I get all that stuff, and they're also coaching, and, I'm a dad, and I've got dance recital, and I've got a wife, and I've got all these roles and responsibilities, and you want to try to fix something that, in my opinion, is not broken. I'm not interested in having a conversation with you, but they don't know what they don't know, right? So it's like trying to appeal to that, understanding that I'm sensitive of your time, and I certainly am not going to waste it. And so that's why I think it's worth the conversation. How do you get guys like in the position to get confident enough to take the background of what you're saying and really understanding it and applying it so that they can get in front to have that dialogue?
So it depends on the engagement, but we will work with sales teams during their meetings. And I'm a big fan of small nuggets, actionable, use it. Let's talk about it again next week. And so there's engagements like that. And that's where we would bring in the negative logical pathway. What kind of meetings do you have coming up? Let's talk through the scenario. And it's not about if they say this, here's how you overcome the objective. Because that's that. I can't remember who taught me that term, but that's where I think, you'll smell commission breath on somebody when you have that type of approach.
You got him to laugh.
I've experienced that commission breath a lot.
So it's more about, a great tool is acknowledging resistance. I'm just going to say all the negative stuff you believe before you can even say it. I'm probably going to push you in a negative direction. I like to think of human behavior as this. If you ever been to a science museum that has one of those huge pendulums hanging from the ceiling, if you wrap your arms around that pendulum and try to pull it towards you, all forces of nature are working against you. But if you walk up to it and just nudge it, it takes very little energy. And what it does is it swings back. And so we teach, a conversation process to just, let's be human. All right. I'm not going to get you to do something that you will never do. So I'm not going to waste my time doing that. So I'm going to structure the conversation to uncover, is there opportunity? Hey, typically we've seen people switch to this because they're frustrated with A, B, and C. You probably don't deal with any of that, right? Well, no, I am kind of frustrated with A. Oh, but it's probably not that frustrating. Well, yeah, it really is frustrating, but it's not frustrating enough to do anything about it. Well, I mean, I didn't know there was something to do about it. And so that's the pendulum swing. And then it opens it up for you to uncover what other potential biases there are. But so there's that type of engagement. And then other engagements, we're really driving market behavior through patient behavior that then we help the sales team leverage. So, the sales team being able to say, 27 patients called and want to learn about the blah, blah, blah knee replacement or whatever.
So, and that's like a kind of a co-marketing sort of thing between the practice and the whatever target that might be, or maybe even independent of, let's just say, whatever, it was the Boeing knee, right? Which doesn't exist. But, I really want to talk to them about it. We've had kind of that high level conversation. Maybe we've identified an issue. And then do you work with that manufacturer to identify that specifically in a region and then direct that traffic towards like a Dr. Molli, where he's like, why am I hearing about this Boeing knee thing all of a sudden? Like, is that kind of what you're talking about?
It kind of, from a compliance standpoint, it's a little bit different than that, but yes.
Okay. Yeah. I just feel like on both sides to what you're doing is unique and, I mean, innovative in terms of like just the way that you're thinking about it, right? I feel like I've heard this conversation kind of before, but not in depth as to what you're talking about in terms of like really understanding the basis of the conversation. And I think the big thing is like measurable, like all these things that we're talking about, like what's the desired outcome and what's the measured outcome? I mean,
no, that's the piece that I love,
especially from business owners. It's like you're tying something very specific I'm going to spend money on, and I'm going to give you my metrics, and you're going to be able to figure out how what this increase is going to look like, right? And we, in a maybe not a short amount of time, but whatever time that we both agree is reasonable to be like, you either hit the mark or you don't, right? And so it's like, I feel like you guys don't get to this place with the hundreds of physician practices and, I'm sure, dozens of med device groups that, work with you all over the country haven't experienced where it's like, no, this works and this makes sense.
So Zed, how do people get in touch with you? If we've got lots of viewers out there looking to say, hey, I really want to explore this more. And Jay, he can do a really nice job here. He'll put that up right here. Website, phone number. What do you best suggest?
I would suggest go to physiciangrowthaccelerator.com.
Okay.
What we've done is we've shared everything. So I'm a believer in private practice. There's going to be people who can just take this information and go get after it. And so there's actually, you can do an online diagnostic. It's not a submit your information to get the results. It'll show you the results right there. It'll tell you what questions to ask yourself. It'll show you what to look for if you're likely unhealthy in that vital that we're trying to identify. And so I think that would be a really good first step. And then they can always, from the website, book a business review meeting where we'll chat with them about what their goals are. And my whole belief is, to me, you talk to someone to see if there's going to be a good fit. It's just, do you know what you want to witness 1, 2, 3 years from now? And how important is it? And are you ready to make some changes that some of them might be a little tough? And if so, we'll be there with you to get it done.
No, that's awesome. And
great stuff.
Yeah, Zed, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it. It's just kind of funny the way that the universe kind of brings people together. So
absolutely,
yeah, I appreciate it. I look forward to, in offline here now that we've gotten a chance to kind of catch up. I'll be reaching out just to kind of connect with you and your group and chat a little bit. I definitely think that there's, some things that I didn't realize that we could probably work together on that I think we need to. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And, I know you're still at the office, but I hope either later on this evening or tomorrow you get to enjoy that wine that we sent you. So
speak about it real
100%.
quick.
I'm about 9 minutes away from it. I live close to the office. So.
Colegio.
Perfect.
Sotillo de la Ribera. That's a nice one.
You guys didn't know that my buddy Dr. Molli is a minor in Spanish, if you guys didn't know that.
12 months in French oak. It's a Tempranillo. And there's a quote here. Each child and each vineyard have their own personality that is forged in the place where they grew up. From the harmony of their union, this wine was born. So it was actually really good. It tasted a little bit more like an Italian to me than a Spanish wine, but and Italian wines are my favorites. But it was really good.
I'm excited.
It sounded like a kid.
It's definitely getting opened.
But Zed, I echo Travis's comments. Definitely look forward to continued conversations. I'm going to send you an email afterwards, and hopefully we can continue value add things to both you and ourselves. And I'm heading to Vegas tomorrow to the American Osteopathic Association of Orthopedics. I'm definitely going to mention that I had an opportunity to speak with you and pass your name along to other physicians that are hungry to kind of embrace that private practice model and kind of figure out a better way for some of their struggles. So
yeah, and I think
I appreciate that.
All of our guests that have been on, since episode 1, through now, and all the viewers, I really do feel like we are developing our own tribe here with people who are, like-minded and, have that commonality of, we can do this on our own, and, let's help support one another. And, I just appreciate you being a part of it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So make sure, folks, share, subscribe, like it. All those things that Zed says at the end of his podcast too, I would imagine, so that we can help spread the word and just great people. Yeah. Each podcast that we do, I feel like we have 2 or 3 other people that reach out to us that show interest in being
So
being
topics,
guests.
like anything you want to hear about.
Yeah.
Topics, subjects, questions, anything like that. Obviously,
we'll answer each and every question to the best of our ability.
Drop us a link. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Zed. Appreciate
thank
it.
you so much. I appreciate
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be coming back next week with another episode, and it's always fun, buddy.
Hey.
Red carpet. We're out. As a disclaimer, this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professional from any such conditions.